The diplomatic station floated in the darkness of space like a metal flower. Inside, Hana stood with the other humans from Earth, waiting. Her hands were steady, but she could feel her heart beating fast. Today was the day humanity would meet the Kralthians for the first time. "They're coming," Taeyang whispered beside her. He was a security officer, tall and careful. His hand rested near his weapon, though everyone knew they couldn't fight if things went wrong. The Kralthians were too strong. The doors opened with a hiss. Cold air rushed in, carrying a smell like stone and metal. Then they entered. Hana had seen the pictures and videos, but nothing prepared her for seeing them in person. The Kralthians walked on two legs like humans, but that was where the similarity ended. They stood 8 feet tall, covered in dark fur that rippled over heavy muscles. Their faces were long, with powerful jaws full of teeth. Yellow eyes watched everything. Sharp claws clicked against the metal floor with each step. The leader walked in front. He was bigger than the others, with silver streaks in his black fur. His name was Vormal, and he was the pack alpha. Behind him came 5 more Kralthians, all watching the humans with eyes that saw prey. Hana's colleague, a diplomat named Do-hyun, stepped forward. His voice shook a little as he spoke the greeting they had practiced. "Welcome. We come in peace, to talk and learn." Vormal stopped. He tilted his head, studying Do-hyun. Then he walked closer, his steps slow and deliberate. Do-hyun took a step back without meaning to. The Kralthian alpha made a sound deep in his chest, something between a growl and a laugh. "You smell of fear," Vormal said. His voice was rough like gravel scraping. "All of you, you shake, you retreat, yet you claim you come in peace." "We come without weapons," Do-hyun tried to explain. "We want friendship between our peoples." Vormal circled the human group. Everyone shifted uncomfortably. Only Hana remained still, watching the alpha with calm eyes. When Vormal passed close to her, she didn't move. She didn't look away. She simply watched him, her face peaceful. The Kralthian stopped. He leaned down, bringing his face close to hers. His breath was hot. His teeth were inches from her throat. Hana could see every sharp point, could smell the scent of meat on his breath. She didn't move. "Strange," Vormal muttered, pulling back. "This one does not fear." "I respect you," Hana said quietly, "but I don't fear you." The other Kralthians made sounds of surprise. One of them, a scarred male named Rakthar, stepped forward. "Prey always fears predator. It is the natural way." "Perhaps," Hana replied, "but we are not prey. We are humans. We are different." Vormal stared at her for a long moment. Then he made a gesture with his clawed hand. "We shall see. Tonight we eat together. You will learn our ways. We will learn yours." The first dinner was held in a large room with tables built for both species. The Kralthians ate meat, tearing it with their teeth. They were not gentle. Blood dripped. Bones cracked. The human delegation tried not to stare, eating their own food quietly. Hana sat across from Vormal. She watched how he ate, how he interacted with his pack. She saw the hierarchy in every gesture. When he growled low, the others became still. When he ate, no one else touched the food until he took his fill. It was a dance of dominance and submission, performed without words. "You study us," Vormal observed, wiping blood from his jaw. "I'm a xenobiologist," Hana explained. "I study how different species live and behave. Your pack structure is fascinating." "Pack is everything," Vormal said. "Pack is survival. Without alpha, there is chaos. Without hierarchy, there is war. Do humans not understand this?" "We understand," Hana said carefully. "But we organize differently. We cooperate without always needing an alpha." Rakthar snorted. "Impossible. Someone must lead. Someone must dominate, or the weak destroy everything." Before Hana could answer, The doors opened again. 3 smaller Kralthians bounded in, moving with the energy of youth. They were cubs, perhaps equivalent to human 10-year-olds. But they already had claws and teeth. They already moved like hunters. "My children," Vormal announced. "Kes, Ral, and Nira. They learn the ways of the pack." The cubs were curious about the humans. They sniffed the air, their ears pointing forward. Nira, the smallest, was boldest. She approached the human table, her yellow eyes bright with interest. "Careful," her father warned. "These are guests." But Nira kept coming. She stopped in front of Hana, sniffing loudly. The other humans at the table tensed. Taiyang's hand moved toward his weapon. The cub was small for a Kralthian, but she still had claws that could tear skin, teeth that could bite through bone. Hana slowly lowered her hand, palm down, until it was near the cub's nose. It was a gesture of submission in Kralthian culture, she had learned, not challenging, not threatening, just acknowledging. Nira sniffed the hand carefully. Her nose was cold against Hana's skin. Then the cub made a small sound and returned to her father's side. "Interesting," Vormal said. His eyes were thoughtful. "You do not pull away." "Should I?" Hana asked. "Most prey does. Most would run or fight or freeze with fear. You did none of these things." "She's a child," Hana said simply. "A curious child. Why would I fear that?" The Kralthians exchanged glances. Rakthar shook his head in disbelief. "These humans are mad," he muttered. "They have no survival instinct." But Vormal was quiet, watching Hana with calculating eyes. Something about her behavior troubled him. It didn't fit the patterns he knew. Prey feared predators. Predators challenged or submitted to each other, but this human did neither. She simply existed, calm and unafraid, as if the natural order didn't apply to her. As the dinner ended and the delegation separated, Vormal called his second-in-command aside. "Watch these humans," he ordered, "especially the female who studies us. There is something wrong here, something we don't understand." "They are weak," Rakthar insisted. "Soft bodies, no claws, no fangs. They are nothing." "Perhaps," Vormal said slowly. "Or perhaps they are something we have never encountered before. Something that doesn't fear because it doesn't need to." He looked back at the human delegation, his eyes finding Hana. "That female let my daughter approach her. She offered submission, but showed no fear. That combination should be impossible." "What are you thinking, Alpha?" "I'm thinking," Vormal said quietly, "that we need to understand what these humans truly are before we can negotiate with them. And I'm thinking that the answer might change everything we believe about strength and weakness." The station's lights dimmed for the sleep cycle. In their quarters, the humans discussed the day. But Hana lay awake, thinking about yellow eyes and sharp teeth, and about the cubs who were learning to be predators while still being children. She thought about trust, and about how it might be the bridge between 2 very different species. Tomorrow, she decided, she would find out. Tay looked at the spray bottle in his hands with wonder. He had already sprayed the wall, the couch, and his brother. Now he was curious about something else. He brought the bottle close to his face and squeezed the trigger gently. A tiny mist sprayed out. "It smells like lemons," he announced. Then he sprayed a little more, trying to figure out what the smell reminded him of. The mist made him blink rapidly. Wu stood up from where he had been kneeling. He still held the washcloth, but he wasn't wiping the floor. Instead, he looked at the mop that was leaning against the wall. It was much taller than him. The handle reached up past his head. An idea formed in his 4-year-old mind. His eyes got that look that all parents know, the look that means trouble is about to happen. "Tay," Wu said slowly, "this mop looks like a space lance." Tay stopped spraying himself and looked at his little brother. Then he looked at the mop. Then he grinned. It does look like a space lance. Wu grabbed the mop with both hands. It was heavy and awkward, but he managed to lift it. He held it sideways, like the energy weapons they had seen in the Space Marine videos. I'm defending the ship from space pirates. Pew, pew! Wu made laser sounds as he swung the mop around. The wet strings on the end of the mop flew in a circle, spraying tiny droplets of water everywhere. From the kitchen area, Yuri glanced over. She saw Wu wielding the mop like a weapon and Tay still experimenting with the spray bottle. She smiled and shook her head. This was going exactly as she expected. She went back to preparing lunch, but kept her ears open. Day, sitting on the couch, covered his mouth to hide his laugh. He made eye contact with Yuri, and she gave him a look that said, "Let them figure it out." In the observation room, Vec was frantically taking notes. His antennae twitched with confusion. Young human has converted cleaning implement into imaginary weapon. Second young human is applying cleaning solution to own face. Purpose unclear. Efficiency rating negative. At that moment, the door to the quarters chimed. Someone wanted to come in. "Come in," Dae called out. The door slid open and Hana walked in. She was 7 years old, the daughter of Jin, another human officer on the ship. Hana and Tai were friends. They went to the ship's school together. "Hi, Captain Day," Hana said politely. Then she saw Tai and Wu. "What are you doing?" "Cleaning," Tai said proudly, "and fighting space pirates." "Can I help?" Hana asked immediately. Wu stopped swinging the mop. "Yes, we need more space marines." Hana looked around at the cleaning supplies. She saw the extra washcloths that Yuri had left on the table. An idea came to her. A wonderful, terrible idea. "If we're space marines," Hana said seriously, "we need uniforms." She grabbed 3 washcloths. She tied one around her own neck like a cape. Then she tied one around Tay's neck and one around Wu's neck. "Now we're official," she declared. Vec, watching through his screen, made another note. His notes were becoming less scientific and more confused. Third young human has arrived, all 3 now wearing cleaning cloths as decorative garments. Logic of human juveniles, still unknown. Tay, now wearing his cape, felt ready for action. He looked at the floor, which was still not clean. In fact, it was wetter than before from all the spray bottle testing and mop swinging. An idea came to him. "Watch this!" Tay took 3 big steps back. Then he ran forward and jumped onto the wet part of the floor. His feet slipped immediately, and he slid across the smooth surface like he was ice skating. "Whoa!" Tay waved his arms to keep balance. "I'm sliding like a spaceship." This looked like the most fun thing ever to Wu and Hana. Within seconds, all 3 children were taking turns running and sliding on the wet floor. Their capes flew behind them. They laughed and shouted and pretended to be ships zooming through space. Yuri peeked out from the kitchen. The floor was now very wet. The children were soaked. The cleaning supplies were scattered everywhere, and absolutely nothing was getting cleaner. She caught Day's eye again. He was grinning widely. "Should we stop them?" He mouthed silently. Yuri shook her head. "Let them play," she mouthed back. Vec's notes had become almost frantic. Young humans have discovered that liquid decreases friction. They are now using this property for entertainment rather than cleaning. All 3 are now saturated with water and cleaning solution. The floor has approximately 2% more water than before, but 0% more cleanliness. Efficiency rating, negative 47%. Hana had a new idea. She picked up the spray bottle that Tay had set down. "We need to make it more slippery for the ships." She started spraying the floor in front of her. Then she slid through it. Tay did the same thing. Soon they had created a system. Spray, slide, laugh, repeat. Wu, meanwhile, had returned to the mop. But now he had a different idea. He put the wet mop head on top of his head like a hat. The strings hung down around his face. "Look," he said, "I'm a space alien." Tay and Hana stopped sliding to look at Wu. His head was covered in the wet mop strings. He looked absolutely ridiculous. All three children burst into laughter. The sound of their laughter filled the quarters. It was pure and joyful and completely free of any worry. They weren't thinking about whether they were doing a good job. They weren't concerned about making mistakes. They were just being children, finding fun in everything they did. Vec listened to the laughter through his recording equipment. He had heard human adults laugh before, but children's laughter was different. It was higher-pitched, more frequent. It seemed to happen for reasons he couldn't identify. He made a note. Young humans produce frequent vocalization of joy, despite failing primary objective. Correlation between failure and happiness does not compute. In the kitchen, Yuri was now making sandwiches. She could hear the chaos in the next room. She knew the floor wasn't getting clean. She knew she would have to do it properly later. But she also knew something else. Her children were learning. They were learning that helping was fun. They were learning to work together, even if they weren't working efficiently. They were learning that trying was what mattered, not being perfect. These were lessons that couldn't be taught with words. They had to be learned through experience, even messy, wet, chaotic experience. Day stood up from the couch. His pants had gotten splashed with water from one of Tay's slides. He walked over to where the children were playing. All three of them were completely soaked now. Their capes were dripping. Their hair was wet. Wu still had the mop on his head. "How's the cleaning going?" Day asked, trying to sound serious. "Great," Tay said. "We're almost done." Day looked at the floor. It was covered in water and soap. The walls had spray marks. The furniture was wet. If anything, the quarters looked worse than before. "I can see you've all worked very hard," he said, and he meant it. That was when things got even more interesting. The noise from the human quarters was getting louder. Children's laughter, splashing sounds, and the occasional thump echoed through the corridor. Other crew members walking by would stop, listen, and then continue on their way with confused expressions. On the security deck, Gron was reviewing the daily reports when an alert came through. It was from Vec, marked as urgent. The message was short and concerning. Possible domestic incident in human quarters. Young humans behaving erratically. Recommend investigation. Gron stood up immediately. He was a Bolvari, a species that looked like a massive rhinoceros that walked on two legs. His people were known for being protective and strong. He took his security duties very seriously. He grabbed his security tablet and headed toward the human quarters. As he walked through the corridors, his heavy footsteps echoed on the metal floor. Other crew members moved aside to let him pass. When he reached the door to Captain Day's quarters, he could hear the chaos inside. Laughter, shouting, splashing. It sounded like a water emergency. He pressed the door chime and waited. "Come in," a voice called from inside. The door slid open. Gron stepped through and stopped immediately. His large eyes widened as he took in the scene. 3 small human children were soaking wet. One had a mop on his head. The other 2 were sliding across the floor like it was an ice rink. Water and soap were everywhere. The furniture was wet, the walls had spray marks, but the children were laughing. They didn't look distressed at all. They looked happy. Gron's training told him that young ones in danger would cry or show fear. These young humans showed neither. He was confused. "Captain Day," Gron said in his deep, rumbling voice, "is everything all right?" Day looked up from the couch. His clothes were damp, but he was smiling. "Oh, hello, Gron. Yes, everything's fine. The kids are helping clean." Gron looked at the mess. Then he looked at the children, then back at Day. "This is cleaning?" "Well," Day said, "they're learning to clean." Wu ran up to Gron, the mop still on his head. He tilted his head back to look up at the massive security officer. "Hi, Mr. Gron. Do you want to help us clean?" Gron didn't know what to say. In his culture, cubs were taught through strict discipline and repetition. An adult would show the correct way. Cubs would copy it exactly. Any play during work time was quickly corrected. But these human cubs were doing everything wrong, and the adults were letting them. "I will demonstrate proper technique," Gron said. This was clearly a training issue. The young humans needed a proper example. He took the mop from Wu's head. The little boy protested at first, but then watched with interest. Gron also picked up the spray bottle and a washcloth. With precise movements, Gron showed them the correct method. Spray a small area, wipe it with the cloth, use the mop to dry it. His movements were exact and efficient. In less than 3 minutes, he had cleaned a section of floor perfectly. "See," Gron said, turning to the children, "this is proper cleaning technique." All 3 children watched with wide eyes. They were impressed. Then Ty asked, "Can you teach us to march while we clean, like Space Marines?" Gron blinked his large eyes. "March? While cleaning?" "Yeah." Hana jumped up and down. "March and clean at the same time." This was not what Gron had intended, but the children were looking at him with such excitement. He didn't want to disappoint them. "Very well," he said slowly. "Watch carefully." He began to march in place, his large feet making heavy thuds on the floor. While marching, he held the mop and moved it back and forth. It looked ridiculous. A massive security officer marching and mopping at the same time. The children immediately tried to copy him, but coordinating marching and holding cleaning supplies was harder than it looked. Tay bumped into Hana. Hana's cape got caught on Wu's arm. Wu dropped his washcloth and stepped on it, slipping again. All 3 children collided in a heap of wet limbs and laughter. Gron stopped marching. This was not going well. He had somehow made things worse. At that moment, another visitor arrived. Silk, the medical officer, appeared at the open door. She was a Mindari, a telepathic species that looked almost human but with skin that shimmered slightly, like oil on water. "I received a call from Gron," Silk said, her voice calm and melodic. "He was concerned about the children's welfare." She looked at the scene. 3 wet children were now trying to untangle themselves while laughing. Gron stood in the middle of the mess, looking confused and slightly embarrassed. Day was still on the couch, now openly grinning. Yuri had come out of the kitchen and was leaning against the door frame, clearly entertained. Silk closed her eyes for a moment. Her telepathic abilities allowed her to sense emotions. She focused on the children. What she felt surprised her. There was no fear, no stress, no pain or confusion. Just pure, bright happiness, joy at being together, pride at trying to help. The warm feeling of being allowed to try something new, even if they weren't good at it yet. She opened her eyes and looked at Gron. "They're fine. More than fine, actually. They're very happy." "But they're not cleaning properly," Gron said. "They're making more mess. Shouldn't they be corrected?" Silk looked at the children again. Tay had found the spray bottle and was showing Wu how to make it spray in a straight line instead of a mist. They were experimenting together, teaching each other. Hana was trying to fold a washcloth like Yuri had shown her earlier, her little face serious with concentration. "They're learning," Silk said softly, "just not in the way you expect." In the observation room, Vec had watched all of this happen. His notes were now several pages long and full of confusion. He had written things like, "Large security officer attempts to train young humans," and "Training appears to fail spectacularly," and "Young humans now more chaotic than before." But he had also noticed something else. Something he couldn't quite explain. The young humans kept trying. Even when they failed, they tried again. Even when they made mistakes, they smiled. Even when they didn't know how to do something, they weren't afraid to attempt it. This was different from how young Quilnari learned. His people learned by avoiding mistakes. These humans learned by making them. Back in the quarters, Dave finally stood up. He had let this go on long enough. It was almost lunchtime, and the children needed to dry off and change clothes. "All right, Space Marines," he said. "Mission complete for now. Time for debrief and refueling." "Aw," Tay said, "but we were just getting good at it." "You can help again another day," Yuri said gently. "But first, let's get you all dried off." Gran watched as Yuri gathered the children and started herding them toward the bathroom. They were still chattering excitedly about their cleaning mission. Wu was telling Hana about the time he would build a mop that could fly. Tai was asking if they could clean the whole ship next time. The security officer turned to Day. "I don't understand human child rearing," he admitted. "In my culture, this would be considered failure. The cubs failed to clean, but you're not upset." Day smiled and put a hand on Gran's massive shoulder. "They didn't fail. They're 6, 7, and 4 years old. They succeeded at being 6, 7, and 4. Gran's eyes narrowed as he tried to understand this logic. Silk, still standing by the door, nodded slowly. She was beginning to see something interesting about humans, something that might explain a lot about this strange, new species in the galaxy. But before she could share her thoughts, someone else arrived at the door. Someone who would change everything. The new arrival at the door was Jin, Hana's father. He was still wearing his engineering uniform, and he had a tired but happy expression on his face. When he saw the scene inside the quarters, he didn't look surprised at all. He looked like he had seen this exact thing many times before. "Ah," Jin said, smiling. "I see Hana found your cleaning day." "Papa!" Hana ran out of the bathroom where Yuri had been trying to dry her off. She was still damp, her cape dragging behind her. "We helped clean! It was so much fun!" Jin scooped up his daughter and hugged her, not caring that she was wet. "Did you do a good job?" "The best job," Hana said proudly. Gran looked at Jin with confusion. "You don't seem concerned that she's soaking wet and the quarters are more messy than before." Jin laughed. "This is every weekend at our place. Last week she wanted to help me paint her bedroom. I said okay. Big mistake." He pulled out his communication device and showed Gran a picture. In the picture, little Hana was covered head to toe in blue paint. Her face, her hair, her clothes. Everything was blue. Behind her, the bedroom wall had paint handprints everywhere. It looked like a blue explosion had happened. "She got more paint on herself than the wall," Jin said, still smiling at the memory. "But she was so proud. And you know what? We finished the wall together the next day. She was more careful the second time. She learned." Gran stared at the picture, then at Jin, then at the wet children. "You let them make such messes on purpose?" "Not on purpose," Day said, joining the conversation. "But we let them try. That's different." Before Gran could respond, a new voice spoke from the doorway. It was old and wise and carried the weight of many years. "Fascinating." Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway was Elder Voss. The Elder was an eternal, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. He looked almost like a very tall human, but his skin had a silver tint, and his eyes were completely white. He had lived for over 300 years and had seen countless species and cultures. Elder Voss rarely left the council chambers. The fact that he was here, in the family quarters of a human officer, was shocking. "Elder Voss," Day said, straightening up and looking nervous. "This is unexpected. Is everything all right?" The elder stepped into the quarters, his long robe somehow staying clean despite the water on the floor. "I received an urgent report from our observer, Vec. He seemed quite distressed about what he called catastrophic failure in human juvenile training." The elder looked around at the mess, then at the 3 wet children who were now peeking out from the bathroom. "I wanted to see for myself." Vec's voice suddenly came through the communication system. He had been watching and listening the whole time. Elder Voss, as you can see, the young humans were assigned a simple task. They failed completely. The supervising adults did not correct them. This goes against all known efficient teaching methods. Elder Voss held up one hand. Vec, come to these quarters, please. I want you to observe something in person. A few minutes later, Vec arrived. He had to duck through the doorway because of his height. His antennae were twitching with nervousness. Being called by an elder was serious. The quarters were now quite crowded. 2 adult humans, 3 wet children, a massive security officer, a telepathic medical officer, an elderly council member, and a confused alien researcher. Elder Voss looked at all of them, then spoke. Captain Day, would you explain to us why you allowed your children to fail at their task? In most cultures, this would be seen as poor parenting. Day took a breath. He knew this was important. How he explained this might change how other species saw humans. The goal wasn't to get a clean floor, Day said carefully. The goal was to teach responsibility and let them practice helping. But they didn't help, Vec said, his mandibles clicking rapidly. They made things worse. They tried to help, Yuri said, stepping forward. That's what matters at their age. I don't understand, Gron admitted. In my culture, cubs learn by doing things correctly. Mistakes are corrected immediately. Day nodded. And that works for your species. But human children learn differently. They learn by doing, by trying, by making mistakes in a safe place where it's okay to fail. He walked over to where Tay was peeking out from the bathroom. He picked up his son and carried him to the center of the room. Tay, did you have fun cleaning today? Yes, Tay said enthusiastically. Can we clean again tomorrow? And did you learn anything? Tay thought for a moment. The spray bottle works better if you don't point it at your face, and floors get slippery when they're wet, and cleaning with friends is more fun than cleaning alone. Day looked at the assembled aliens. He learned 3 important lessons today: cause and effect, safety, cooperation. He learned them by experiencing them, not by being told. Jin spoke up. When Hana painted herself blue, she learned that paint is hard to clean, that it gets everywhere if you're not careful. That preparation is important. The next time she helped paint, she was more careful. She wore old clothes. She put down protective sheets. She remembered what happened last time. Silk, the medical officer, closed her eyes again. She focused on the memory she had sensed from the children earlier. I felt their emotions during the cleaning. They felt proud, important, trusted. These feelings will stay with them. The next time someone asks them to help, they'll remember feeling good about trying. They'll want to help again. But what about the mess? Vec asked. What about efficiency? Elder Voss finally spoke again. His voice was thoughtful. Vec, how do young Quilnari learn new tasks? An adult demonstrates. The young one copies exactly. The task is repeated until perfect. And if a young Quilnari tries something new? Something they weren't taught? Vec's antennae stopped twitching. He thought about this. They don't. They wait to be taught. Trying something without instruction would be inefficient. It would lead to mistakes. Exactly, Elder Voss said. Your species learns to avoid mistakes. You become very good at doing things you've been taught. But what about things you haven't been taught? Vec didn't answer. He was beginning to see where this was going. Elder Voss turned to look at all the humans in the room. Humans teach their children that mistakes are acceptable, that trying is good even if you fail. This creates adults who are not afraid to attempt new things, who can adapt when situations change, who can find solutions to problems they've never seen before. Gron spoke up. But isn't that dangerous? What if they make mistakes in important situations? They do, Day admitted. Humans make mistakes all the time. But we learn from them. We adapt. That's why we were able to develop space travel without being taught by other species. We tried. We failed. We tried again differently. Jin nodded. And yes, our children make messes. Today, they made this mess. He gestured at the wet quarters. But they also learned. They experienced. They grew. That mess is the price of learning. Elder Voss smiled, something he rarely did. I begin to understand your species better. The mess is not failure. The mess is data. The laughter is not distraction. It is motivation. You don't train children. You let them grow. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone processed this. Even Vec was silent, his antennae drooping as he reconsidered all his observations. Elder Voss stood in the middle of the messy quarters for a long moment, just observing. He watched Tay wiggle in his father's arms. Still damp but happy. He watched Wu peek out from behind Yuri's leg, his hair sticking up in all directions. He watched Hana in Jin's arms, already asking when she could come back to play with her friends. Then the elder made a decision. I am calling an emergency council session, he announced. This matter is too important to delay. Vec's antennae shot straight up. An emergency session? For this? For this, Elder Voss confirmed. He pulled out a small device and spoke into it. Within minutes, he had arranged for a holographic council meeting. The representatives of various species from across the galaxy would attend virtually. Yuri quickly ushered the children into the bedroom to get them into dry clothes. They protested, wanting to see the space holograms, but she promised they could come out once they were dressed. 20 minutes later, the quarters had been hastily cleaned by the adults. It still wasn't perfect, but it was presentable. The children, now in dry clothes, sat quietly on the couch. They had been told this was very important, so they were using their best behavior. Holographic projections filled the room. Representatives from dozens of species appeared, looking confused about why they had been called. There was a representative from the Quilnari, looking very similar to Vec, but older. There was a Bolvari elder, even larger than Gron. There were Mindari, Throman, Eternal, and many others. Elder Voss, one of them said, a crystalline being that reflected light in rainbow colors. Why have we been gathered? What emergency requires immediate attention? Elder Voss gestured to Vec. Our researcher has been observing human behavior for 6 months. Today he witnessed something that he classified as catastrophic failure. I disagree. I believe he witnessed something extraordinary. The holographic representatives murmured among themselves. One of them, who looked like a large bird with 4 wings, spoke up. Please explain. Humans are our newest coalition members. Understanding them is important. Vec stepped forward nervously. At Elder Voss's encouragement, he began to explain what he had observed. He described the cleaning task, the children's chaos, the mess, the failure to complete the objective. He showed video recordings from his observation equipment. The council watched the footage. They saw Tai spray himself in the face. They saw Wu turn the mop into a weapon. They saw all 3 children sliding across the floor. They saw the adults watching and not correcting the behavior. Many of the representatives looked shocked. Some looked disapproving. In their cultures, this would never be allowed. Then Elder Voss spoke. What Vec saw as failure, I see as a teaching method. What he saw as chaos, I see as learning. Captain Day, would you explain your species' approach to child development? Day stood up. He felt the weight of dozens of alien eyes on him, even though they were just holograms. He was speaking not just for his family, but for all of humanity. Our children don't learn best through strict instruction, Day began. They learn through experience, through play, through being allowed to try things, even when we know they might fail. He pointed to his sons on the couch. Today, my boys wanted to help clean. They're 6 and 4. I knew they wouldn't do it perfectly. I knew they'd make a mess. But I also knew they'd learn something valuable. What did they learn? Asked the bird-like representative. They didn't learn to clean properly. They learned that helping is fun, Yuri said, standing next to her husband. They learned that trying is good. They learned that we trust them to help, even if they're not perfect at it yet. These lessons are more important than a clean floor. Jin raised his hand. My daughter is 7. When she helped me paint, she made a huge mess. But the next time she helped, she did better. She remembered what happened before. She adapted. She learned from experience. Silk, the medical officer, added her perspective. I sensed their emotions. They felt pride, joy, trust. These positive feelings will make them want to help more in the future. If we had stopped them, corrected them harshly, or shown disappointment, they would associate helping with negative feelings. They might not want to help next time. One of the council members, an ancient being made of what looked like living stone, spoke in a slow, rumbling voice. But surely there must be consequences for failure. How do they learn discipline? They learn it gradually, Day explained. Today, we let them play while trying to help. Tomorrow, we'll teach them a bit more. Each time, they'll get better. By the time they're teenagers, they'll know how to clean properly. But more importantly, they'll want to help. They'll have confidence. They'll be willing to try new things. Elder Voss turned to the council. This is what makes humans unique. They raise children who are not afraid to fail, who see new situations as opportunities, not threats, who can adapt and innovate because they've been encouraged to experiment their entire lives. Groan, who had been listening quietly, suddenly understood. That's why humans developed space travel so quickly. You weren't afraid to try things that might not work. Exactly, Jin said. We try, we fail, we learn, we try again. That's how humans have always done things. The Quilnari elder in the hologram spoke up. Our young are trained to perfection in known tasks, but when faced with unknown problems, they sometimes struggle. They wait for instruction instead of experimenting. Other representatives began sharing similar observations about their own species. The Bolvari were excellent at following established procedures, but slow to develop new ones. The crystalline beings were methodical and careful, but lacked flexibility. The bird-like species planned everything in advance, which made them struggle with unexpected changes. Humans, it seemed, had a different strength. They were messy. They were inefficient. They made mistakes. But they adapted quickly. They innovated constantly. They saw problems as puzzles to solve rather than obstacles to avoid. Elder Voss smiled. Perhaps we should all learn something from human parenting, allow room for safe failure, encourage experimentation, value adaptation alongside perfection. The council meeting continued for another hour. They discussed how different species might incorporate some human teaching methods. They talked about creating exchange programs where young aliens could learn alongside human children. They debated the balance between efficiency and creativity. Finally, the meeting ended. The holograms faded away. The quarters were quiet again. Tay, who had been sitting quietly for what felt like forever to a 6-year-old, raised his hand like he was in school. Yes, Tay? Day said. Can we help clean again tomorrow? I think I can do better now. Everyone in the room laughed. Even Vex's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Maybe we'll try something different tomorrow, Yuri said, ruffling her son's hair. How about helping organize the storage closet? Tay and Wu's eyes lit up. What's in the storage closet? Day and Yuri exchanged another one of those looks that parents share. In the corner of the room, Vec was making notes on his data pad, but his notes were different now. Instead of failure, objective not achieved, he wrote, success, multiple learning outcomes observed. Young humans demonstrated enthusiasm for helping, creative problem-solving, cooperation, and willingness to attempt tasks despite uncertainty of outcome. He paused, then added one more note. Recommendation: Continued observation. Hypothesis. Human child-rearing methods, while appearing chaotic and inefficient, may produce highly adaptable adults. This could explain human success in rapid technological advancement and social integration into coalition. He looked up at the three children, who were now asking their parents questions about space stations and whether aliens had toy hover cars they could play with. They were curious, energetic, and completely unafraid of not knowing things. Vec's final note for the day was simple. There is method in this madness. Further study required. As the group began to leave the quarters, Gran stopped at the door. He looked back at Tay and Wu. Next time you clean, the large security officer said seriously, I would like to help. Perhaps I can learn from you. The boys grinned at him. Okay, but you have to wear a cape. Gran's eyes widened in surprise. Then, slowly, he nodded. If that is required for proper human cleaning protocol, then I will wear a cape. As everyone left, the quarters finally quiet, Day put his arm around Yuri. So, he said, do you think we changed the galaxy today? Yuri smiled. I think our sons just taught the coalition that mess and learning go together. Not bad for an afternoon. The children, already playing with their toy spaceships, had no idea they had just shown the entire galaxy a new way of thinking about childhood, learning, and growth. They were just being themselves, curious, messy, enthusiastic, human. And that, as it turned out, was exactly what the galaxy needed to see.